What's up internet, Kevin here. Now that the dust has had a little time to settle from E3, I wanted to talk to you guys about my 5 favorite brand new games that were announced this past week. I'm not talking about stuff that we already knew about and we got a little more info on, like Fallout 4, Halo 5, No Man's Sky. I'm talking about games that we had no idea existed until this past week, starting with For Honor. Now this was probably the most pleasant surprise I saw at Ubisoft's press conference. It looks like a very interesting fusion of 2 very different war games, Chivalry and Dynasty Warriors. The basic idea is that you have 2 teams of 4 players, taking the form of different really popular historical factions of warriors. You've got knights, Vikings, and samurai. And while there's only 4 players on each team, it does that whole sort of Titanfall thing where you also have to deal with armies of computer-controlled enemies. So while there's actually a pretty small number of player characters, there's a lot of action going on the screen. What makes this game really interesting, though, is its approach to combat. It's not this fast-paced third-person hack and slash. Instead, the whole thing is very methodical looking. You have to be very careful about what stance you're using, where you're blocking, and what attacks you're using based on your opponent's stance. So it's a lot more interesting looking instead of just seeing people swing swords left and right till things die. I love the core concept, I love the art direction. The only thing I'm not completely sold on is the 4v4 aspect of the game. I kind of want to have a little more action going on in that, which maybe they'll add more modes as time goes on because there's still no release date projected for it yet, so it might be a little time before we see this one. Now second up is a game that admittedly we don't know a whole lot about yet. We've just got the opening trailer to go off of, and that's ReCore, which is going to be exclusive for Xbox One. Now like I said, we don't know a ton about this game yet. We really only have the teaser trailer to go off of, but from the looks of it, this is going to be a post-apocalyptic game where you work together with robot allies. The trailer in specific showed a dog-shaped one that works with you for a bit, blows up, but then you put it in a new body, which is basically a huge giant. And from the rest of the trailer, it looks like you're going to get more than just one robot ally at a time. Now, given this isn't a ton of information to go off of, but one other thing we know for sure is that it's being developed by Concept, which is led by Keiji Inafune, the creator of Mega Man. So this is definitely in what I would at least consider good hands, and definitely a title I want to know more about. Given the fact that we only had a teaser trailer and there's no projected release date, this is probably something we're going to see gameplay for at next year's E3, which I look forward to. Now third on the list is a game that shares actually a lot of similar ideas to ReCore, but takes it in a very different direction, and that's Horizon Zero Dawn, which is going to be an exclusive PS4 game from Guerrilla Games. Now, where Horizon is similar to ReCore is that it's a post-apocalyptic game with an emphasis on robots, but like I said, it goes in a very different direction. First off, instead of just being some kind of recent apocalypse where there's a lot of barren wasteland and dead things, this is farther in the future, so you're going to see a lot of ruins of modern-day civilization, but surrounded by lush green forests. So it's kind of have this interesting mixture of primitive, but also futuristic vibe going on. On top of that, while there are robots in the game, they're not working with you. In fact, you're actually hunting down and fighting them. And they also happen to be shaped like giant dinosaurs, which is freaking awesome. We did get to see some early on footage of the gameplay during Sony's press conference, which, given this early on, you kind of have to take it with a bit of a grain of salt, but if the final product looks anything like what we saw in the demo, this game could be absolutely stunning. Guerrilla Games has said that this is going to be taking place in an open world, which, as long as it's nice and dense with interesting ruins and a lot more robot monsters, I'm totally in. You know, I have to admit, I've never really been a huge fan of Guerrilla Games' flagship series, Killzone, but if Horizon does end up being as tactical and as intense as the demo made it look out to be, I could quickly shift my opinion of them. Now, fourth up is a game that was probably one of the biggest surprises at this year's E3. It was the sole moment of emotion and soul during the entire EA press conference, and that's Unravel. Now, this game really blew up in popularity right after its press conference because it's one of the few games that we saw at a press conference where the developer stood up and really just talked about it, and it sounded like an actual labor of love for him and not just what kind of game is going to get the biggest sales margins. Now, given when you look at a game like this, the whole yarn aesthetic isn't exactly something new. We've been seeing a lot of this lately, but what makes Unravel interesting is that it looks like the yarn is actually going to play a very central part in the game's mechanics. When you use the string that makes up Yarny's body to connect to things or swing from place to place, that's actually using up some of the yarn that creates him. So as you use more and more of it, you're going to get smaller and smaller and eventually run out. So a lot of the game is going to be focused on not only using yarn to get places, but doing it smartly so you don't run out. The indie-style platformer is definitely something we've been seeing a lot of in the past couple years, and it's starting to be a very, very dense genre, but Unravel looks like it has enough interesting, unique things and a great aesthetic to really help it stand out amongst all the rest. Now, we don't know for sure what platforms this is all going to be available on just yet. The only one we know for fact is that it will be available on PC because you can already pre-order it on Origin for for 20 bucks. Now last, and somewhat least on this list, is The Legend of Zelda Triforce Heroes. You know, honestly, overall, I really didn't care for Nintendo's press conference this year, but this was the one game that actually stood out to me, because admittedly, I'm a pretty big fan of Legend of Zelda, but I'm also a huge fan of co-op focused games. You know, I'm really happy to see that Nintendo is re-exploring the whole four-sword style dynamic, but I like the fact that they're actually trying to also reinvent it by adding a lot more mechanics to make it stand out a little more. Specifically, the fact that you can now pick up other players to move them around or create a totem pole. There's now a class system where you can actually specialize each of your links a little differently, so you can each have a different strength in the party. And there's an emote system, so even if you're playing online, you have ways of signaling and telling other players what you need them to do in order to solve puzzles. This is far from being one of the flashiest announcements at this year's E3, but honestly, it's one of the ones where I can really see myself just having good, genuine fun when I get together with a few friends and play it. Now, I'm gonna cheat just a little bit because I know I said 5 games I was excited for, but there's one more I want to talk about, and it's one that I got really hyped for when I first saw the trailer, but as time went on, I've had a little more time to kind of be more morbidly curious than anything, and that's the Final Fantasy VII Remake. You know, growing up, Final Fantasy was easily my favorite franchise, but in the past decade, it's really kind of turned into something more of almost an abusive relationship. And while Square does have a lot of great base material to work with, the fact that this is going to be a proper full remake, and looking at what they've done in recent years, I can't help but wonder what kind of changes they'll make and whether or not it's going to be for the better. Because honestly, I really doubt we're going to see it just be a graphical remake. You know, we're going to see a redone combat system, redone gameplay mechanics, and maybe even some minor changes to the plot, which change on its own is fine, but like I said, looking at their more recent work, I'm not sure how they're going to end up handling it. So am I excited for it? Yeah, but there's also this voice in the back of my head constantly going, it's probably not going to be what you're hoping it's going to be, and you're going to end up getting disappointed. But we'll find out. You know, given the fact that we really only got a teaser trailer, we're probably not going to see this game for a while. I'm willing to bet we're not going to see it till 2017, because that would be the 20-year anniversary of when FF7 was originally launched. So there you guys have it, my favorite games that were announced at this year's E3. There were a few other titles that showed up, and of course more information on titles we've already learned about, so make sure to let me know down in the comments what games you were really excited to hear about this year. As always, if you enjoyed this video, hit that thumbs up button to let me know, and subscribe, as well as follow me on Twitter. I'll be seeing you guys soon with more content, but until then, I'm Kevin Kenson, and I'll see you guys later.